over the weekend, Mark Gurman's Power On newsletter gave us a huge amount of clarity in terms of what's going to happen with the iMac later this year. He said that this year, the transition to Apple Silicon will shift into high gear with several new Mac models based on the following processors: a new M2 chip, last year's M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, and new super-powered versions of the M1 Max. And to give you some more context on what those super-powered chips will be, Apple is said to be taking multiple M1 Max dies and combining them together using a die-to-die interconnect in sets of either 2 or 4 dies to essentially create M1 Max Duo and M1 Max Quadro Super chips. And that first M1 Max Duo chip was exactly what we were expecting to go into the iMac Pro for various reasons, which I'm gonna show and explain in this video, including internal software leaks. But unfortunately, Mark Gurman has just made it completely clear that he doesn't believe the iMac Pro is gonna be getting this new super-powered M1 Max Duo chip, which is extremely disappointing. So before I explain exactly what he said over this weekend and why it's so important to understand, I want to first get into all the reasons why we thought it made sense for the iMac Pro to get this new high-powered chip with both leaks and common sense, so let's get right into that. Last year in November, after we already got our hands on the new M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pros, Ross Young confirmed that the new iMac Pro will be coming with a 27-inch mini LED display with 120Hz ProMotion technology. And that right there was a big deal because it hinted to us that Apple was about to go all out on this new iMac Pro, since implementing that technology would be pretty expensive. And then shortly after that, a software developer named Hector Martin, who is currently working on bringing Linux to Apple Silicon Macs, found something groundbreaking in terms of these new M1 Max dies. Apparently, the IRQ controller in the M1 Max is very clearly engineered with a currently unused second half for a second die. He even said it's technically a second set of registers that are currently all idle. And going even further, the IRQ controller only has support for up to 2 dies, not 4. And because of all this, it basically showed that Apple had already put everything in place in terms of the software side of macOS to connect 2 M1 Max dies, but not yet for 4 of them. So this led me to believe that Apple planned to release an M1 Max Duo Mac before the release of the next macOS software version, which would mean that we should see a new M1 Max Duo iMac Pro in the spring before Apple announces the new macOS in June like they always do. But what really got me believing in an M1 Max Duo iMac Pro was a couple of very good points made by some people on Twitter. First of all, the Apple Tree made a great point about the limitations of the regular M1 Max chip, specifically that it only supports up to 64 gigs of unified memory, which is already half the amount compared to Apple's current Intel 27-inch iMac from 2020. So if Apple wanted to keep that same 128 gig RAM option around, the best way to do that would be to introduce the M1 Max Duo chip with literally double the number of RAM chip slots. And then going further, he pointed out that the M1 Max 32-core GPU is limited to around 10.4 teraflops of performance, which is definitely lacking compared to other desktop GPUs. Like for example, only matching up to the raw performance of the RTX 2080 or the RX Vega 56, which is literally built into the 2017 iMac Pro that I'm using right now. So the idea that Apple would release a new iMac Pro with a 32-core M1 Max GPU that's basically only as powerful as a 5-year-old base model iMac Pro sounds ridiculous. So I thought they would absolutely need to give the new model an M1 Max Duo chip with a 64-core GPU. And then perhaps the weirdest part of all is that the current 27-inch Intel iMac has 2 chip options that are actually faster than the M1 Max chip in terms of raw CPU performance. And keep in mind that these are 14nm desktop chips from 2020. And if we take a look at Intel's new Alder Lake chips, even the new i5-12600K is about 23% faster in terms of single core and 39% faster in terms of multi-core performance in Cinebench R23, and then the flagship i9-12900K, which uses over 4 times more power, is actually 119% faster in terms of Cinebench. So with that said, I again assumed that Apple needs to pack in a 20-core M1 Max Duo chip to compete. But unfortunately, Mark Gurman just released a new report over the weekend that hints at the most disappointing iMac Pro we could ever imagine. Apparently, he believes that the larger iMac Pro will come with M1 Pro and M1 Max chip options. That's it. He even confirmed this further by saying this: "And with the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips already on the market, I don't believe the iMac Pro launch is too distant either. While we'll get new Macs in March, I'm told Apple is already gearing up for another round of Mac releases around May or June." And that's exactly when Ross Young is personally expecting Apple to reveal the new iMac Pro. So this claim by Mark Gurman could come as an absolute shock, because many of us were expecting a much more powerful chip coming in the Apple Silicon iMac Pro, especially if Apple wants to give it the Pro title. And we even had some reports from Dylan DKT that Apple is working on a 12-core chip for the iMac Pro instead, but Mark still believes that we'll only be getting up to the M1 Max. So with all of that disappointing news out of the way, let's actually try to make sense of the idea of the iMac Pro not getting anything more than an M1 Max chip. The first point to make is that even though the raw performance numbers for the M1 Max look disappointing compared to the competition, the real-world performance is actually really good. For example, the Affinity Photo benchmark, which was optimized for Apple Silicon, shows the 32-core M1 Max as being the fastest GPU in the world for that editing app, even beating out high-end desktop GPUs. And in terms of video editing performance, the M1 Max outperformed our $15,000 Mac Pro in various tests, even the ones we didn't think it could pull ahead in, like 8K Canon RAW. And for things like programming, we were surprised to see that the M1 Max was quite a bit faster than the Mac Pro. So even though the raw performance numbers aren't that impressive, the real-world performance is actually more than enough for most people out there. So that right there could be a good reason for Apple not to bother with putting an M1 Max Duo into the iMac Pro, since the regular M1 Max is already enough for almost everyone out there. And to make this point very clear, Max's friend owns a full-time wedding videography business with multiple employees, and they all use M1 Max. No, not the new M1 Max MacBooks, but literally 24-inch M1 iMacs. And he himself ended up replacing his trash can 2013 Mac Pro with an M1 MacBook Air instead of getting a desktop 2019 Mac Pro, and he's never been happier. In fact, he was initially planning on using the M1 MacBook Air until the new 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro was released, but he's been so happy with his MacBook Air that he decided to keep it since it's fast enough for all of his video editing needs. So the point that I'm making is that real people and real businesses are using Apple's original M1 chip with great success, and that's not even the M1 Max chip, which is many times faster, especially for high-end workflows. So in reality, most people out there probably do not need anything more than the M1 Max chip, and they definitely don't need the crazy 20-core M1 Max Duo chip. And I think a lot of us have fallen under benchmark sickness, with many of us wanting our machines to be the fastest in terms of benchmarks for bragging rights, even if it ends up being absolute overkill for the task that we actually need it for. So while I would really like Apple to pack in an M1 Max Duo chip into the iMac Pro, I have to admit that for my workflow of using Photoshop and Final Cut Pro for editing, the regular 10-core M1 Max chip in the 16-inch MacBook Pro is probably already overkill for my needs. And going even further, if Apple gave the iMac Pro and M1 Max Duo, it would likely be so fast that it would cannibalize the sales of their upcoming high-end Mac Pro desktop machine, since that 20-core Duo chip would literally be fast enough for 95% of the common use cases out there. So what Apple could do is limit the iMac Pro to just the M1 Max chip, perhaps upping the clock speeds a bit to make it a bit more powerful, and then offer people who actually need much more power the high-end Mac Pro desktop machine. And the major benefit to this is that it would allow them to lower the base price of the iMac Pro to make it more affordable to the average consumer, likely around $2,000 at the base price, instead of the previous iMac Pro, which started at a massive $5,000. And then on top of that, I already concluded in a different video that the M1 Max Duo chip wouldn't be able to fit within the iMac Pro's chin. But if the best option is the regular M1 Max chip, then they can easily fit it within the chin and keep the design as thin as they'd like to make it without having to go all out on the cooling. And just like Mark Gurman said earlier, doing this would allow them to get this new iMac Pro out earlier without having to wait for this new Duo chip or anything like that. So in the grand scheme of things, the reality is that Apple could easily get away with releasing an M1 Pro and M1 Max iMac Pro, and people would still be buying it left and right, including ourselves. But hopefully Mark Gurman is wrong about all of this, and hopefully we actually do get a more powerful chip. And with that said, let me know what you think down in the comment section below about all of these leaks and rumors. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click the circle above to subscribe for more videos like this one, and check out one of those two right over there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.